Welcome everybody to RC number 8. So today's subject is exactly how simple should we be going when we're talking about simplification. To demonstrate this, I'll be using a pair of passages from PT 84, section 1, first passage and the second passage. So basically questions 1 through 12. What are we actually going to cover here? So an issue that I often get emails about is generalizing, simplifying, doing the structural reading thing. Makes sense when I hear you do it, James. But I struggle when trying it on my own. I think that for many of you who face this issue and kind of think about it, your difficulties stem from not knowing exactly how simple you need to make your simplifications. And there's like this weird sort of balancing game. Like how do you actually, how far do you actually know how to put your simplification and sort of your irreverent hand waving? And that's what we'll cover today. Uh, and over the past few months, I've come across this pair of passages in PT84 that overall just seem useful in helping my students and you guys in calibrating your generalizations and implications to the right level. And I think it also touches just on a broader level about how to actually look at RC properly. So yes, very specifically, it's about how to calibrate your uh, simplification levels, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But in addition to that, I think it just helps you get in touch with some of the more core lessons that I've been trying to impart regarding RC. One thing I do want to note here moving forward for this particular presentation, unlike most of my RC content, I won't be doing like a full read through of the passages with the first and last and the predictive thing. And I also won't be doing questions. I will leave to do the pleasure of actually performing the RC to you guys. I just wanted to give you guys a logical preview and a framework and just kind of give you a different lens to look at a passage. And then maybe with that lens, if you apply that and look at the passage sort of fresh on your own, you'll more instinctively be able to sort of put the details in their place, so to speak, in terms of focusing less on detail and seeing more logic and kind of helping you do what I do, just not identically, really. So before pushing further, I do want to add a brief reminder. In my recent Insights 11 video, uh, I discussed the helpfulness of importing your LG indifference in terms of I don't care about the story, importing that indifference into RC. So just again to specifically recap what exactly I mean by that indifference. We don't care about company K losing the bidding war to company R. When the student's going on the lane with a field trip or which factory it's visited in which order by which executive, it is all the same to us. It's fully interchangeable. They could just change all the names, the setting, they could change everything. We don't care. What we do care about though is how all the individual pieces relate to each other, to the rules, or initial setup, that sort of thing. So again, we don't care about how the pieces are named. In fact, what even the pieces are. We only care about how we are restricted in moving them around. The relationships. That's all that we care about. So most students instinctively understand when I talk about this difference in LT. In fact, I believe the section LT is formatted specifically to kind of promote that sort of view. So you guys, by and large, utterly fail to accept it for RC. And I say fail, but I don't really mean that in like, oh, you fail RC. It's just of all the things that I teach and advocate, I would say this sort of indifference for RC is the single most um, controversial is the wrong word for it, but it's the single thing that you guys fight me the most on. It's not that because most of the time, if I do something that you guys don't find useful, you won't even bring it up. You just won't do it, and that's fine. That's like I said, don't fix what's not broken, right? But for some reason, you guys not only don't want to do what I'm suggesting here, instead of just continuing to do things the way you do them, you bring it up and ask me to like justify it. Like for whatever reason, this is a lightning rod for that sort of thing. And yeah, I don't know why that is necessarily. It may be that you just don't have too many other things to fall back on in RC, so you want something different than what you're doing. But the one thing that I'm offering is something you don't like, so you feel compelled to spend on it. But yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, that's what's going on here. Hopefully, though, the next few slides will show you that the thing I'm indifferent to the story. I only care about the structure and relationships. That it can apply to RC as well. And maybe you do generically believe me that it can apply, even if you're not successfully doing it already. But hopefully, this would just get you a little closer to the point of actually pulling it off. Why these two passages from PT84? They are about two very different subjects, but they do overall share some very surprising structural parallels. So from a structural logic standpoint, I'll just give you kind of a preview of what we will flesh out with a little bit more detail. But paragraphs 1 and 2 are actually identical for both passages. And paragraph 3 is nearly identical for both, save for the fact that the alternative presented in passage one's paragraph 3 is a legitimate alternative, whereas the alternative presented in passage two's paragraph 3 is trapped. And then passage one ends on paragraph 3 and passage two moves on to paragraph 4. But hilariously, the alternative presented in paragraph 4 of passage 2 is legit. It's like they couldn't stop themselves from trying to presume the parallel structure. It's like, okay, so everything is the same from paragraph 1 and 2. By the time we get to paragraph 3, there's a slight divergence. Yes, they are both talking alternatives. One of them is a legit alternative, and this next passage, the alternative presented as trash one. So like it's as if passage two, like, oh no, no, wait, but I am like passage one. Look, in the next paragraph, I do give you a legit alternative in paragraph 4. So it's, to me, these are just about as close to identical as you can get. But of course, none of this means anything until we actually look at what the passage means. So we'll do a little bit of that on the next step. Passage one, which is about the greenhouse gas theory. For those of you who were born too late to kind of remember when this was sort of the big thing. This is basically the '90s version of what climate change is now. We didn't have our Greta Thunberg back in the day because kids were not much of here public farms really of their own volition like that, but or at least there just wasn't like a cost-effective way for the typical kid to do it. But yeah, it's just kind of the greenhouse gas that occupies the place and the primacy that the term climate change does now. So yeah, there's just a little bit of context there. We'll start with paragraph one, and this one shows us that we have a pretty typical RC setup, a problem and a response. And though there's probably not much value in saying it, we'll just kind of go through and flesh that out a little bit. The problem here is that the Earth is getting warmer, clearly a problem. And the approach slash response to the problem is the greenhouse gas theory. So there's a problem, we're trying to figure stuff out about it. This is a way of figuring stuff out about it, specifically the greenhouse gas theory. Challenge two, or paragraph two, excuse me, is a challenge against the response was mentioned in the last paragraph. And so I just want to highlight the word challenge in orange because I feel like that's a transitional word that I'm using here. It is going to change, and that's just kind of the formatting choice that I've made. So yes, paragraph two, initially, when I looked at it, I got, oh, this is a challenge. But of course, it didn't stop there. That's why it's transitional. Not all is well in the greenhouse gas world. Apparently, we had some measurement issues early on. So what that meant is that the greenhouse gas theory says that we should expect to measure certain things, but because we are bad at measuring, we weren't actually able to measure the things that the theory said we were going to test. And that let the haters claim that the theory was wrong. Simple enough. But. Our author does move on to say that apparently we got better at measurement later. And I guess this ultimately shows that greenhouse gas theory works because now that we're doing measurements correctly, it is consistent with what the theorists said we were supposed to get. So, take that, haters, right? Seems to be my recollection of this paragraph. So it's not merely a generic challenge against the greenhouse gas theory, but I would say it's more along the lines of specifically a practical challenge. So again, the author isn't saying that the theory itself is wrong or inaccurate or bad, but it's merely that we didn't have the skill to properly deal with it. So yeah, that's what I would consider a practical challenge, rather than just the generic challenge against the response. I would say specifically it was a practical challenge. And the reason I say this is because of paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 offers yet another different challenge against the response. This challenge, like I said, is slightly different. It is not just a practical, the theory is fine, we are the ones who are not good enough. It's not that kind of challenge. But it offers a fully alternative response, which in this case was the solar energy theory. This cuts a lot deeper than a practical challenge. Because again, a practical challenge, it's not really a problem. No one's really accusing the theory directly of being not good enough. It's us who are not good enough. It's we who are not, capable of wielding the theory properly. But if you're offering an alternative response entirely, an alternative theory, and that theory turns out to be a better explanation or a useful explanation, that basically displaces and shuts down the other theory in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's a pretty damaging thing. At least it's much more damaging than, oh, the theory is great. It's just that we're not good enough at using it. So hopefully you guys can see that this kind of challenge cuts a lot deeper. So I would classify this, very creatively titled, because as you guys know, naming is not really my strong suit, as an alternative challenge. So practical challenge versus alternative challenge when it comes to theories or techniques. To me, in my mind, those are two different things. Hopefully I've demonstrated exactly how that played out in this passage. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say about this passage. I'm not going to get any further into the details or anything like that. Let's push on to passage one is about a less well-known thing called the cognitive interview. And I just want to note that this is just a fascinating thing for you guys. Whenever a cop says that they're interviewing you, it's an interrogation. It's an interrogation. Make no mistake about it. Like generally speaking, you don't want to be interviewed by a cop without counsel present. If you have that choice. All right, so let's keep moving on. Paragraph one again. It's this is actually kind of identical to passage one. It's a pretty typical RC set of problem and response. Problem is the cops need to extract info from people, and the approach slash response to the problem is what cops have called the cognitive interview technique. It is a way that they are trying to solve the problem of needing to extract information from people. So again, paragraph two is very, very parallel to what happened in passage one. We have a challenge, but it's not just a generic challenge. Not all is well in cognitive interview world. The author doesn't say that the cognitive interview is outright wrong or bad or somehow insufficient for the task that it was designed to do, but it's hard to train cops to perform the cognitive interview correctly. They're just not doing it right. This again sounds a lot like a practical challenge. Again, the author is not saying the technique itself is wrong, inaccurate, bad, or not up to the task of performing what it was designed to perform, but it's merely that we lack something external, i.e., the training infrastructure, through the so it's external to the technique itself to properly wield the technique. So we're lacking something that is outside of the design of the cognitive interview process, prevents us from doing it right. Paragraph three, yeah, again very, very reminiscent of passage one. It's yet another challenge against the response that was discussed here. This is an alternative challenge specifically. However, the alternative this time, which is hypnosis, does not feel nearly as legit as the solar energy alternative presented in passage one. In fact, they mention in passing that hypnosis basically doesn't do anything much better than cognitive interview. In fact, has a lot of other uncontrollable problems. Seems to be a recollection of what went on. Paragraph four, which I want to note again, did not exist for passage one, but kind of you'll see in a second how it may as well have existed in passage one. It's yet another challenge against the response, and I didn't think it would turn out this way based on the first sentence. So when an academic starts off by saying, "Hey, it would be real nice if we found something with all the upsides and none of the downsides," you need to expect them to end with, obviously no such fairy tale ideal solution exists. It would be great if it did, but we don't get it. Hilariously here, though, they do say that there is such a thing, and I believe it's called the eye closure technique. And it's ultimately presented by the end of the paragraph as a legit alternative challenge to the cognitive interview. So ultimately, paragraph four is just really a rehash or just a repeat of paragraph three, and it just with a different and better challenge. So really, you could see paragraphs three and four of passage two as really just a sort of different sort of response to paragraph three of passage one. It's getting a little cumbersome to talk about. I'll line them up on a future page, but basically, it's remarkable how similar these things turned out, and they are about two completely different things. As promised, let me just recap both of these passages structurally, side by side, so it's a little bit clearer what I'm saying. Start with passage one. Again, pretty typical start in paragraph one is a problem and response. Paragraph two levels a practical challenge against the response. The challenge is ultimately discarded and the response is upheld. Paragraph three levels an alternative challenge against the response. The alternative isn't ridiculous, but ultimately the challenge is discarded and the response is upheld. Let's move on to passage two. Again, it starts pretty typical. In fact, logically the same way as paragraph one, passage one does. The problem and response. Paragraph two levels a practical challenge against the response, but the challenge is discarded and the response is upheld. Paragraph three, it offers an alternative challenge against the response. This time the alternative is ridiculous and the challenge is discarded and the response is upheld. But then we get to paragraph four, where they give us yet a different alternative challenge against the response. This time the alternative is super legit. And ultimately, the challenge is suggested as a replacement to the original response. So, unlike passage one, which ends with the idea ultimately overall that the original response to greenhouse gas is good and is upheld the whole way through, by the time we get to paragraph four at the end, they are saying that that they're not upholding the cognitive interview anymore, is that we should start doing this other thing. So now we get to the takeaways portion. There is such a thing as going too simple when generalizing or simplifying passages. Like, if I really wanted to, you could say, you know, paragraph one is the first paragraph of an RC passage, right? That's about as simple as you can make it. And it would be a correct description insofar as what it said, but it would be unhelpful because it's missing too much data, right? So yeah, I understand that it can be hard to find that sweet spot between max detail and max simplicity. But yeah, I think that these two passages from PK84 demonstrate an ideal level of depth when it comes to how far you're supposed to simplify the concepts of the passage. So I do want you to remember this important thing, though. I am not advocating that you do the first and last sentence only thing that I do. I mean, try it if you're curious and to see if it works for you, but that's never the point of what I do in RC, is to try to get you guys to do this thing. I am, however, advocating that you find some way, within your current reading habits to discern this sort of logical structure beneath all the kind of logical structure that I've laid out side by side for passages one and two of PT84. You can actually disagree with the exact structure that I have. It's fine. If you find a different structure, maybe it's less parallel, maybe you find a little bit more difference in the cognitive interview passage than I found there to be. That's fine so long as it helps you get through it faster and answer questions correctly. I am agnostic to what you're actually saying is or is not the case structurally. If it gets you to the correct answer, that's all that matters to me. That's really what I'm trying to do here. It's just that I feel like the structural style of thinking, not the results, the structural style of thinking is something that too many guys don't really have any clue how to do. And that's what this is for. So as far as specifically how you can train yourself to see the structure, so I mean, it's one thing for me to again demonstrate the structure by just kind of laying it out for you, but like, how do you actually look at the words and get this as a response? Like, honestly, don't ask me. Um, and then I don't know if I want to call that a shortcoming of me as an instructor, but I just don't think anybody can really tell you how to do that because anybody who purports to do that is going to give you certain language patterns, and that's the beginning of a very, very dark and twisted path down tiers and wrong answers for RC. There's just too much language variability. There's too many different ways that can go wrong for you that I am not going to even attempt doing that. What I found over the years is that just exposing you guys to the language has, for whatever reason, proven sufficient for most students to improve their RC. So that's just what I'm doing here. I'm just simply exposing a particularly interesting, in my experience, instructive pair of passages where you can really finally maybe have a chance at turning on the light bulb and be like, aha, actually, I finally get what James is talking about here. I can be indifferent to a certain amount of the details because underneath, when you take away all the garbage floating on top underneath, this is really a simple and small idea. There's a response that we have to a problem, and it's not perfect. In what ways is it not perfect? In some ways, it's a practical reason where it's not the problem, it's not the response itself, but it's really our ability to enact or perform the response. And maybe not just that, there's actually a better response out there. You can discard the original response and go after it, yes or no. This is all a very, very simple discussion. And so many of you guys are just handicapping yourselves from seeing that by just being so super hyper focused on getting all the details right. And the most tragic and honestly for me, heartbreaking irony is that for those of you who are putting easily three, four, five times the amount of effort and time reading a passage just to get the details, you still don't understand the details properly. You still don't. You still get them wrong all the time. And that's because you're not looking at it with the proper lens, and so you're misinterpreting details. It just frustrates and honestly, it makes me sad to see that happen because you're working harder and getting less for it. And that's why I'm so insistent on this stuff. It's just not working for so many of you guys, and hopefully this is the way out. So we've reached again the very end. We're gathering, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. But more importantly, if there's anything that works or doesn't work, or you'd like to have inquiry for like a tutoring setup or a free consultation, uh, email address is here. Send emails along that way, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for being here.